My doctor told me I had an STD at 13 weeks pregnant, and my husband swears he got it from a wild animal. I want you to decide whether it destroyed our marriage or saved it. I want you to understand something before I tell you what happened. Adam and I were not a rushed thing. We were not two strangers who got swept up and married too fast. We had known each other since we were 15. We grew up in the same neighborhood. He was the boy who walked me home because he said the streetlights on my street were too dim, and he just wanted to make sure I got back safely. We had been together 5 years when this happened. We had a son, 3 years old, loud and perfect and obsessed with dinosaurs. I was 27. Adam was 28. And in early 2020, I was 13 weeks pregnant with our second baby. I want you to feel the weight of what we had built before I show you how fast it cracked. March 2020. I was already anxious walking into that appointment. My 12-week scan had flagged something irregular near my fallopian tubes. Nothing specific, just a shadow, just a reason to come back. I had been sitting with low-grade dread for a week, convinced I was about to hear something terrible about the pregnancy. The good news came first. The baby was fine, heartbeat strong, growing exactly as it should. I remember exhaling so hard my shoulders dropped. I almost laughed. Then my doctor closed the door. She has been my doctor for years. She delivered my first son. She knows my history. I watched her sit down in that chair across from me with a look I cannot fully describe, except to say it was gentle in the way people are gentle when they are about to say something they know will change your life. She told me my routine blood work had come back with something unexpected. I tested positive for chlamydia. I heard the word. And then for a moment I heard absolutely nothing. The fluorescent light above us buzzed. She was still talking. I could see her mouth moving. She said she needed to ask me something and that she was asking without judgment. Was my relationship monogamous? I said yes. But the terrifying thing was the half-second between her question and my answer. That half-second where I had to check, where the word yes did not come instantly, where some part of my brain flickered and started running through my life like I was looking for something I had misplaced. I said yes. I meant yes. I had never been with anyone but Adam since the day we got together. But in that room, with my doctor looking at me like that, I suddenly was not certain about anything at all. She explained the treatment and told me Adam needed to be tested immediately. She handed me a pamphlet I did not look at once. I walked to my car and sat in the driver's seat for 11 minutes without starting the engine. I know it was 11 minutes because I watched the clock. I did not cry. I did not call anyone. I just sat there looking at the wall in front of me while my brain ran through 5 years of memory, searching for a gap. I could not find one, which meant either I had been completely blind or Adam had been exceptionally careful. I drove home. I stood in the shower until the water ran cold. I am not proud of this detail, but I scrubbed my arms until they were pink and raw, like I could wash off something that had already settled into my bloodstream, like the betrayal was something topical that I could get ahead of if I just scrubbed hard enough. Then I picked up my phone and called my husband at work. He answered on the second ring. He sounded normal. He asked how the appointment went. His voice was so ordinary, so completely unguarded. I told him the baby was fine. There was a small sound of relief on his end. Good, he said. That is good. Then he started asking about timing and whether I needed anything from the shops on his way home. I said his name. He stopped talking. I said, Adam. They found chlamydia in my blood work. Silence. Not the silence of someone thinking. Not a pause while someone chooses words. Long, total silence that stretched long enough to make my hands go cold. He said, what? I said, you heard me. He said something. I do not fully remember what because by then I was crying. Not soft crying. The ugly kind where you cannot control your own voice. I said words I am not entirely proud of. I asked him how he could do this to our family. I asked him if he even thought about our son, about the baby, about what we had built. He started calling back immediately, over and over, 7 missed calls in the time it took me to walk from the kitchen to the couch. I did not answer any of them. He came home 2 hours later. I heard the car in the driveway. I heard his key in the lock. And then I heard the sound of his keys hitting the wall. Not thrown in rage, not thrown at anyone, just thrown, like he needed to put that energy somewhere and that was the closest surface. Our son looked up from his toys. Adam saw him. Something shifted in his face immediately. He crossed the room, picked him up, held him for a moment, kissed the top of his head. Then he carried him to the couch, sat him down with his dinosaurs, and walked directly into our bedroom. The shower ran for a long time. I put our son to bed. It took 40 minutes because he wanted 3 stories and kept asking where Daddy was. I kept saying Daddy was tired, buddy. Daddy had a long day. I sat on the edge of his bed until he fell asleep, listening to the sounds of the house. And I felt something I had never felt inside our home before. I felt like a stranger in it. Adam was sitting on the edge of our bed when I walked in, head in his hands, shoulders curved forward. He looked like a man carrying something unbearably heavy. I told him quietly that he needed to get tested, that he had passed an STD to me while I was pregnant, and that I needed him to tell me the truth. He lifted his head, and he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You cheated on me." I actually laughed. It was the involuntary laugh of someone who has heard something so absurd their body cannot process it as real. I said, "What?" He said, "You heard me." And then he was standing, and then we were both talking at the same time. His voice was not cold, it was not calculating. It was raw and broken, and he was accusing me of having an affair with the same level of disbelief I had been carrying all afternoon. He said he had never touched another woman. He said he would swear it on our son's life. He said the only possible explanation was that I had done something and was now trying to put it on him. I stood there listening to him, watching his face, watching his eyes, and I felt two things simultaneously that should not be able to exist together. I believed he was telling the truth, and I knew one of us had to be lying. Our son started crying from down the hall. We both stopped. We stood there in the sudden silence, breathing hard. He looked at the door, then he looked at me, and something behind his eyes went very, very far away. He packed a bag and left to stay with his parents. That night, I lay in our bed alone, and I started going back through 5 years of memory again. This time I was looking from his direction. He tested positive. When he told me, his voice was flat. No anger, no defensiveness, just flat. 2 people infected. 2 people swearing innocence. Nowhere left to go. He asked for a paternity test. Those 4 words hit me somewhere I did not know I was vulnerable. I had expected more accusation, more anger. I had not expected him to look at our unborn child with doubt. The fact that he could, the fact that 3 years of marriage and a son already between us was not enough to override that doubt, told me something I had not been ready to hear. He genuinely believed I had done this. We did the test. The baby was his. The results came back and I thought, finally, now this is over. Adam looked at the results for a long time. He did not look relieved. He looked like a man who had been told a fact that did not actually resolve anything he was struggling with. We went to therapy. It felt like 2 strangers being polite in an elevator. The therapist asked questions. We answered them carefully. We never screamed in that office. We never broke down completely. We were just 2 people who had been gutted and were now performing functionality. Friends heard pieces of the story and chose sides without knowing the full thing. His mother called me once, gently, and suggested that sometimes women in complicated pregnancies became confused about certain things. She did not say it cruelly, and that almost made it worse. My sister called Adam a liar and told me I deserved better and offered to help me look for apartments. I declined. I do not know exactly why. He moved back in. We did not celebrate it. He just came home one Sunday with his bag, put it in the closet, and we made dinner together in silence and ate it while our son talked about dinosaurs. We chose each other. I am not sure we chose each other happily. I think we chose each other the way you sometimes make a decision not because it is right, but because the alternative is unthinkable. And then we buried it. Nobody tells you what a marriage looks like when both people have decided to stay, but neither person has decided to believe. It looks like Sunday mornings that are almost warm. Dinners where the conversation is fine. Bedtimes with the kids that are genuinely lovely, because the kids do not know anything is wrong, and their joy is real even if yours is borrowed. And then he picks up his phone and smiles at something, and your stomach drops. And then you come home 40 minutes late because of traffic, and he does not say anything about it. He just looks at you for a moment longer than necessary when you walk in. And you know what the look means, and he knows you know, and neither of you says a word. We were polite, we were careful, we were functional. We were completely, quietly toxic in the way that only people who love each other can be toxic. Not through cruelty, but through this suffocating, never-spoken, mutually understood suspicion that had moved in with us and taken up permanent residence. 3 years of that. He was on his phone late one evening. Both kids finally asleep. I was reading. He was scrolling. And then he stopped. I looked up because he went so completely still, the kind of still that gets your attention before anything is said. He was staring at his screen with an expression I could not read. He said my name. He turned the phone toward me. It was a wildlife conservation video. A documentary narrator explaining that koalas in Australia have a significant chlamydia epidemic, and that bushfires, which displace koala populations and push them into human areas, dramatically increase the risk of human exposure to infected animals. I watched the video. I looked at him. His eyes were doing something. He was working through something in real time, right in front of me, and I watched it happen the way you watch something land after a long fall. He said, "The festival." September 2019. 6 months before my diagnosis, before I was pregnant with our second. We had gone to a bush festival in Queensland. It was one of those weekends we had looked forward to for months. My sister was watching our son. We were just us for a few days, in a way we almost never got to be anymore. On the drive-in, we saw displaced wildlife everywhere. The fires that season had pushed animals out of their habitats and into the roadside. Kangaroos, birds, and one koala, low in a tree, pressed against the bark with a hollow, exhausted look that I can still see clearly when I think about it. Adam stopped the car. He got water from the back. He approached slowly. He cupped water and offered it. The koala drank. And then, in the way that frightened and exhausted animals sometimes do, it wrapped its arms around his arm and held on. He stood there with this animal clinging to him, looking at me with pure delight, and I took a photo on my phone. We still have it. I looked at it again recently and had to put my phone face down. The koala eventually urinated down his arm and across his shirt. He flinched. We laughed so hard. We rinsed his hands with the bottled water we had left and did not think twice about it. The festival had limited shower facilities. We did not shower properly until the last day. Over that weekend, we were intimate. We were happy. We were not thinking about contamination or infection or anything except how nice it was to just be two people again without the weight of routine. We had not connected those 2 days until the night he watched that video. We pulled everything up together, side by side on the couch, both looking at the screen. There are documented cases, not many, but documented. Zoonotic transmission of certain chlamydia strains from koalas to humans is possible through direct contact with infected fluids, particularly with prolonged skin exposure and inadequate washing. The fact that we were asymptomatic meant it could have stayed dormant for months, undetected until my pregnancy screening. Adam made a GP appointment the next morning. We went together. We explained everything. The doctor confirmed that while uncommon, what we were describing was within the range of what science considered possible. Not certain, not proven retroactively, but biologically plausible, with a timeline that matched. Adam sat back in that chair and exhaled like he had been holding his breath for 3 years. I watched the lightness come over him, the way his shoulders dropped, the way he looked at me with eyes that were finally clear. For him, the mystery was solved. The weight had lifted. For me, something much more complicated was happening. Here is what I know. The science is real. The timeline fits. The exposure was documented. We have the photo. I was there. The dormancy is medically consistent. The doctor did not dismiss us. Here is what I also know. For 3 years, I chose to believe my husband had cheated on me. I made peace with it quietly, privately, in the place where I keep the things I cannot say out loud. I decided the truth was too dangerous to pursue, and that staying was what I wanted even without knowing. And he, for 3 years, believed I had betrayed him. He raised our children. He shared our bed. He sat across from me at dinner. He laughed at my jokes. He held me when I cried about things that had nothing to do with any of this. And the whole time, underneath all of it, he thought I had cheated on him. The koala explains the infection. It does not explain the 3 years. It does not reach back and undo the suspicion. It does not give us back what we spent. We went back to therapy. A different therapist this time. We told her the whole story from the beginning. She said something I have been sitting with ever since. She said the infection was never the real injury. The real injury was what we decided it meant. We are in a better place. I want to be honest about that. We communicate differently now. We do not keep things at a polite surface anymore. We argue, actually argue, and then we actually finish the argument instead of letting it go quiet and cold. The intimacy came back slowly. The paranoia has mostly faded. We joke about it sometimes. He will do something absent-minded and I will say, sarcastically, "Sure, blame the koala." And he will laugh in a way that is also a little sad. We both understand what the joke contains. But I would be lying if I told you the doubt was completely gone. Sometimes it is late, and he is looking at his phone and smiling at something, and there is still a small flicker. A quarter second. A shadow that passes across my chest before I push it away. I choose to trust him. Every day I make that choice deliberately. It is not instinct anymore. It is a decision, which is maybe more meaningful, or maybe just more exhausting, and I honestly cannot always tell the difference. Here is what I need you to sit with. The koala explanation is scientifically possible. It is not confirmed. It cannot be confirmed retroactively. We were tested for the same strain, but strain matching between the animal and the people who were exposed was never done. We have a plausible explanation, a matching timeline, and a photograph. That is what we have. So here is what the comments section is going to argue about tonight. Is a plausible explanation the same as an answer? Because there are 2 versions of what happened in my marriage. Version 1. My husband was faithful for 10 years. He touched a sick animal. He got unlucky. We spent 3 years destroying each other over something that was no one's fault. We are the victims of a biological accident and a catastrophic misunderstanding. Version 2. Something happened. Maybe once. Maybe not even meaningfully. And when the diagnosis came, he was desperate and scared and smart enough to find a story that fit. And over 3 years, he told it to himself enough times that he started to believe it. And when that video appeared on his timeline, it was not a revelation. It was a lifeline. I do not know which version is true. I have chosen to live in version 1. I made that choice because I love him, because our children deserve parents who are present and not just performing presence, and because I am not sure certainty is actually what I was ever chasing. But some nights I wonder. And that wondering does not feel like doubt anymore. It feels like something I have simply learned to carry. So I will ask you what I could never ask him directly. Do you think the koala story is real? And if it is not, and if you were me, and you had a good life and 2 children and a husband who holds your hand when you fall asleep, would you want to know?
If you enjoyed the story and stayed until the end, I truly appreciate you being here. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider liking the video, subscribing, and sharing your thoughts or suggestions in the comments. I read them all, and your feedback genuinely motivates me to keep creating and posting more stories for you. Thanks for watching.